Markup languages like HTML and XML are a way of mixing text and symbols within a single text file so that a computer can distinguish and manipulate sections of the document. In this demonstration, I'm opening a Editing with Markup Editors solution, which has a single WPF project within. I'm going to start by adding the classic markup file, which is called an XML file. Right-click, choose Add, New Item. If you scroll down to the bottom of this list, they're in alphabetical order. You'll see XML file. I'll call it Tour. Visual Studio puts the file in my project and starts by adding one line of markup, this header, which says this is an XML file and which version of XML I'm using and the encoding for this file. If you wanted to put a comment in an XML file, comments look like this. Comments start with the angle bracket and then the exclamation point or bang operator and then two hyphens, and then it ends with two hyphens and the angle bracket. The way I added that comment by highlighting the code was I used a keystroke. I used Control-K and Control-C to comment this out. You start by putting in tags. I want to have a tours root element. So you see that Visual Studio's markup editor, when I hit the close angle bracket, it stubbed in the end tag. And it keeps doing that. Of course, you probably know this. If you want to have a single line, you can erase this last tag and put a / here at the end. That's considered to be valid. Now I can compile this. If it's not valid, let's say I leave this out, Visual Studio's markup editors will warn me that I'm doing something wrong by putting a red squiggle underneath that. And if I hover over that, it'll tell me the tag was not closed. Let me show you another problem. Let me change this by removing one R. Now I'm going to get some errors that say things like expected end tag tour. My point is that the editor has some basic functionality built in. There, of course, are other kinds of markups. There's also HTML. You see I have a file here called aboutus.html. Now if I open that up, you'll see that it has some HTML tags in there. And it's got a doc type at the top that tells it what kind of HTML we're using, what type of specification. And if you look at the top, Microsoft has added this doc type XHTML5. This is what's going to validate the tags as I type them in here. So now I get a little better IntelliSense than I got over in the XML file. Now you can see the snippets available. So if I type in this anchor tag snippet and hit the tab key 2 times, it stubs in the rest of the tag, href equal, and then the pound symbol, and then put some content in there. So these are code snippets. It knows all of the eligible tags. It makes sense in an HTML5 document. Let's try another one. I'm going to do form, and then I'm going to press tab 2 times. And as you see, it put in an action equal and a method equal and a form. Notice that I get IntelliSense when I work with things like attributes. When I type the equal sign, Visual Studio puts in the beginning and ending quote. These are settings that you can control in Tools Options. Here's another markup. This one's called mainWindow.xaml. This is using a special dialect of XML. Now on the bottom half of this screen, you can see the XML. There's a root element that says window, and then there's a number of definitions in here, including namespaces, XML namespace definition. What this tells the editor is to look inside this namespace to find the allowed elements. So when I type in something here, like let me say I want to put a text box in here. When I type this in, that's verifying that the tag is valid. And it can also then look up the valid pieces of the text box. So when I type in the spacebar here, I can get a list of all of the eligible attributes that I can use on this element. Again, you'll see Visual Studio. When I typed in the word text and the equal sign, it stubbed in the beginning and ending single quotes this time. This is another setting that you can change inside Tools Options. And here I'm going to show you one last feature. This is an event attribute. I'm wiring up an event handler for this. So you see that Visual Studio prompts me and said, would you like to create a new event handler? If I hit the tab key now, it will write some code for me. And if I press the F7 key, you'll see that it also wrote some code in my code behind file. Control-Tab to switch back to the XAML editor. So what do I want you to take away from the XAML editor? It's similar to the other two editors, but it's even got more IntelliSense because it knows about the schema. So let's go back and fix this XML file that I created earlier. This one here, this tour.xml. It'd be nice if I had a schema that would tell me whether tours was allowed or description was allowed and what attributes are allowed in the tour element. I already have one here. I've got a tour schema available. And you can see that I've got some elements here. I've got a tours element and things like that. So what I'm going to do is add this tour schema to the tour XML file. That's easy to do. Make sure you have your tour.xml file selected and then touch the text editor. Now you can go over to your property window, press F4 if you do not see the property window, and click on this schema section, and then click on this button with 3 dots on it. This lists all of the schemas that Visual Studio knows about. Many of these schemas are used by Visual Studio. For instance, this schema for ADO.NET. The one I'm looking for is listed here, tourschema.xsd. So I'll click here, and then I will go to this Use column and say Use this schema, and then I'll click OK. Now I'm back in my XML file. I'll erase my existing XML and start fresh. Look at that. It knows there's a tours element, which is my root element. It automatically adds the XML namespace, which points to the tour schema. And it knows that inside this tours element, I can only use a tour element. And inside this one, I can only work with the tour name. These are in a particular order. Next comes description and so on. It also knows what attributes are allowed. So what have we seen in this video? You don't have to use a separate tool to work with markup files. The same great features available for code editors are also available for your HTML and XML files.